Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. As you might sadly remember, the Tampa Bay Rays eliminated the Yankees last season in the divisional series, and this season will most likely be the Yankees' toughest opponent in the AL East standings. Now, as we continue to preview the other teams in the AL East, we're going to be joined today by Alex Murphy. He's the co-founder of the Raise the Roof Network to give us some insight on the 2021 Tampa Bay Rays. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the show.
How's it going?
Doing all right. So people can follow you on Twitter, Alex_Murphy Jaw, I guess short for journal. And of course, follow the Raise the Roof Network on Twitter as well. Raise the Roof, as in Tampa Bay Rays, the Roof TB on Twitter as well. Of course, you have your website, raisetherooftb.com. So just gives a little, background to the site. You're a co-founder, contributor, writer. You also do some of the podcasts. Just, what was the genesis behind it?
So basically, I guess the genesis is that for those that can see behind me, the Maryland flag, I just graduated from the University of Maryland. I graduated there in May, and I studied journalism. I wanted to do some sort of sports journalism. Obviously, I came out at literally the worst possible time for sports, considering that there were really no sports going on at the time that I graduated. So basically what I did was there was just a couple ideas that I had started to float around my head with a few of my friends. And since I didn't have anything really going on in terms of a full-time job, I started thinking, well, hey, I know a bunch of people are doing podcasts. Why don't I do that to keep myself going when it comes to staying on top of different sports related things. So I did a generic one. I ended up, because I was in marching band at Maryland, I ended up doing a marching band one, which I'm still doing. We started those up in May. And there was an idea that I had previously tried to do with a friend of mine, Evan, who's actually one of our co-founders and one of the people on our Raise the Roof podcast, that we tried to start. I think it was last year meaning 2019 in terms of 2020. And that didn't end up working out. So I was like, once the Major League Baseball season ended up starting in July, at some point I wanted to create some sort of a Rays podcast. So I ended up talking with Evan. There was another guy that I met, one of our co-hosts, Gibby. He's also Evan, but his last name, since there's two Evans on the podcast, we just call him Gibby because his last name is Gibson. Mm-hmm. So we met him on the Marching Man podcast and found out that he was a huge Rays fan. He's from the Tampa area. So the three of us decided to go start a podcast up in August, start talking about the Rays. Obviously, with the postseason run and everything like that, we started getting a lot more traction. And then when I heard that some other people wanted to possibly get involved, then we started expanding a little bit more and adding more stuff. So now, along with the podcast, we added in another podcast. We have Twitch going on. We have Twitter and Instagram. We have a YouTube channel that we started, obviously the website, and a bunch of other things that we're getting together with other people, also TikTok. So we've definitely expanded a lot more. We've added on a lot more people. We've tried to talk to as many people and hopefully more and more within the Rays community and outside the Rays community and all throughout baseball. So it's definitely exceeded my expectations by a lot because I didn't really think anything of it, but it's been incredible so far.
Yeah. Now, in terms of you and the Tampa Bay Rays, the team itself, I mean, did you get drawn to them as a fan just from your friend with college? I mean, are you a Tampa Rays fan yourself?
So I'm a huge Rays fan, and the story behind it's kind of weird. So I live in South Jersey. I grew up a Phillies fan, 20 minutes outside of the stadiums in Philly. And my family, we've had season tickets to Phillies games for, 15, maybe 20 years, somewhere around there, on and off. So I grew up a big Phillies fan. And then 2008 comes around. Obviously, the Rays and the Phillies play each other in the World Series. I happen to have the opportunity with my family to go to Game 5, which is the game that the Phillies ended up clinching it. And that game was crazy and all of that. But that season with the Rays and how crazy things went, I remember specifically on ESPN, outside of the worst to first thing, they had a lot of walk-off wins that year. I think it was double-digit walk-off wins. And that was something, whenever I turned on ESPN, I felt like I was seeing them every day just doing something crazy, doing something different. And there was something that just struck me with the core of that team, who they had. And it stuck with me. And then I ended up going to my first game at the Trop in 2009. And then it just kept developing and developing and developing. And then now I'm here. And it's crazy to think about because there's obviously not a lot of Rays fans in the Northeast part of the country. There's a lot of them down in Florida in that area. But it's just weird that it ended up developing like that.
That's crazy. Yeah, because I was going to ask you, and I figured, let's say the franchise obviously came in '98, so it'd be hard unless so you figured you're always going to love another team first, and then somehow the Rays come into your life. But that is a very interesting story, especially with Philly, because Philly, New York, Boston, very the city's very tied to the teams. But
Yeah.
this, I guess, you must have been overtaken by your passion by the Rays, and
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
that Longoria back then, and Price was starting to come out, and then a Carlos Pena, the first baseman.
Yep.
So that was
Yeah.
an exciting team, and
Yeah, there were a lot of guys on that team. There were a lot of guys, but yeah, it was. I mean, thank God I did it now because the Phillies are in kind of limbo when it comes to everything going on. So it doesn't feel as bad of a decision anymore, considering that I think it was after 11. They haven't been to a playoff appearance since, and I don't know if they've had a winning season since. So I'll take it.
So I guess we'll fast forward to now this season, 2021. Of course, I think in the AL East, it's going to be Yankees, and of course the Rays. Even minus Blake Snell, they're always going to be tough. So I think it's going to be Rays and Yankees probably at each other's throats most of the way. I think Toronto's going to be improved.
Yep.
Baltimore is still like 5 years away from being relevant, and Boston, I just think they're in the limbo mode. So it's going to be Rays Yankees. So that's why I'd love to have you on. But we'll get to that big offseason move with Blake Snell. Now they ship him out, but the Rays were pretty close last season, right there to the World Series. I mean, what were your feelings? Do you think they should have held on to him and gone for it again this season, or did you like the move to get some prospects from San Diego?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because as a Rays fan, it's really, really hard to get attached to a player just because of the fact that guys are moved so often or in transit. And I know that Snell had 3 years or so remaining on his contract. And the way that the Rays do their contracts, I don't know if this is how every team does it, but I know that the Rays specifically try to backload their deals so that once a guy, they get the most out of a guy when he's not making that much. And then when he starts making 10 plus mil, then they'll start considering trying to flip him. And I think that Snell was getting to that point. If not, he had gotten to that point. And I go back and forth on it because I wanted him to stay because of the fact that I wanted them to try to just do the same thing again, run it back. But I also know that the return that we got for him compared to the other trades that the Padres had made with the other teams where they got Musgrove and they ended up getting Yu Darvish, the Rays got the best haul by far out of the out of those three guys. I mean, you get Luis Patino back, who was their third best prospect and has an electric arm, and I know pitched in the majors last year, but before then hadn't pitched above A ball. So it's going to be interesting to see his development. And then they ended up getting Francisco Mejia back, who is a really, really interesting catching prospect just due to his ceiling at the start of his career and then him not really reaching that point. But hopefully with the Rays, he'll be able to at least get to that point at somewhat to that point where people thought he was coming up as a prospect. And then I think they ended up getting another catching prospect in Blake Hunt. And then they got another pitching prospect in Cole Wilcox, who is out of Georgia. The Padres drafted him in the third round in 2020. And the thing that I really, really like about him is that, so Georgia had two starting pitchers in coming out of that draft, Emerson Hancock and Cole Wilcox. And they were both first-round talents, and Wilcox was a first-round talent, and he got paid first-round money. He just got drafted in the third round because draft stuff is weird. And his stuff is as good, if not better, than what Hancock's stuff was at Georgia. So that really excites me because he kind of went under the radar, the fact that he got drafted in the third round. So, again, the biggest thing with all of that is that those guys aren't going to be, for the most part, Major League ready going into this year, and Snell was going to be Major League ready. So I go back and forth on it. I think at the time I didn't like it as much, but I also understood what the Rays were doing. Now the guys that they've gotten in free agent signings and the pitchers that they've gotten, so Rich Hill, Colin McHugh, Chris Archer, those guys, bringing them into the rotation and helping out, I think I feel a lot more comfortable about where the rotation was compared to when they first traded Snell.
Yeah, and I was going to get into Archer in a second, but I was a little surprised that move. Again, 1 year deals, $6.5 million. But, obviously early as the Rays pretty good, scuffed a little bit. Then went to Pittsburgh, obviously had the surgery last season. But we were kind of surprised they bought Archer back, even though it was a 1 year deal, but still like $6 million for the Rays. It's, it's kind of pricey.
Yeah, I definitely was a little bit more surprised because the way that he left Tampa, there was definitely some bad blood that arose. So, I mean, this has happened with a couple of guys. He also got into a feud with the mayor of St. Petersburg, Rick Kreisman, about how I think it was those comments, and then Kreisman basically chirped back at him saying, well, it was tough when you lose 19 games in a season, which is what Archer did one of those years. So there was definitely some bad blood after he had left. And I don't know if that had worn away, but I like the move because Archer's a known commodity in Tampa. He was good there. He wasn't, obviously he went to a couple All-Star games. He was not helped by run support in most of those seasons because he ended up having mostly losing records and wasn't necessarily great in terms of the win-loss side of things, but he was a very effective pitcher. He struck out a lot of guys, threw a lot of innings. And the thing that I learned about Pittsburgh is that, we won the trade now fully for Archer because we got Archer along with Glasnow, Meadows, and Shane Baz, who I'm really excited about. So that is now hilarious because Pirates fans are just, I'm sure that they are so angry considering everything that's going on, even though they will probably get Kumar Rocker first overall pick in the draft this upcoming year. So I'm sure they'll be happy about that. But the thing that I found out about Pittsburgh's pitching staff, I think it was Glasnow talked about it in an interview, was basically that if one thing worked for one guy, then the pitching coach just said, do what that guy did and try to morph it towards you, which is the absolute worst way to run a pitching staff because guys are different and have different things going on. And I wonder if that was part of it with Archer. And I know he added in a pitch and that screwed him up in some way, but I think that with Rays pitching coach Kyle Snyder there, and Kyle Snyder's done a great job so far as a pitching coach of the team, I really think that he'll be able to bounce back and rebound because I just think that he was in a bad situation and had bad coaches around him. And I think with a better coaching staff and with a better situation, he's going to prosper more.
Yeah, so you can have Glasnow, of course, and again, going back to that Pirates deal, an absolute steal. So Glasnow, Archer at the top. Then you're looking at, veteran. You got Rich Hill, and also it seemed like they're going to give Yarborough a kind of a full shot at the starting rotation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, I think they will. And Yarborough's weird because I think the way that people first got to know him was that when the Rays started experimenting with the opener, he was the guy that came out right after the opener and then pitched like 5-6 innings as if he was a starter, but he just didn't start the game. And he's really underrated because, you're not going to see him get like a crazy flashy ERA. He'll sit somewhere between 3.5 to 4.5, somewhere around there. But he has one of the lowest opponents' exit velo when it comes to guys hitting balls off of him, just because he doesn't throw that hard, and a lot of stuff he throws is junk. But it's extremely effective, and I think that he'll either feature as a 2 or a 3 on the team right now. But I've also heard that, I think it was Rosenthal put it out, and then some other people talked about it, but that the Rays might be experimenting with 8 to 10 guys throwing somewhere between 80 to 100 innings over the course of the season. So that ends up basically you take as many of what people would consider would be the starting pitchers of the team, and you essentially turn them into like 2 starting rotations that you would throw out during the season. I don't know if they're going to go full throttle with that. I think they might experiment with that at some point. But in terms of Yarborough, I really hope that he can get like a really good chance in the starting rotation this year to flourish, because I really like his stuff. And as a fellow lefty, I really enjoy lefty junk, and lefty pitchers, I think, are some of the most effective, if not the most effective, just group of guys when it comes to pitching in baseball. So I want to see him flourish a lot more in 2020. And I think he's going to get a good shot at that.
Yeah, and I think because he's tall, so you expect him to throw hard, but he doesn't. Like you said, he throws chunks, but he's very lanky and just funky. So I think he definitely could be effective. And of course, the bullpen with the Rays kind of lights out. You got Anderson, Fairbanks, I guess Diego Castillo. I mean, is there an official closer, or it's just kind of whoever's available that day?
It's probably going to be closer by committee. I know that Anderson was kind of the de facto closer, but he wasn't. I think that the way that they're going to do it is just, if they get in whatever situation that they're going to get into, whoever they see is the best guy to come out in that spot, then they'll throw him out, and then they'll just kind of rotate like that, because I'm hoping that the bullpen will be able to morph from being like absolutely perfect for a 60-game season, just how that goes, to morphing that into, stretching that out to a 162-game season. Because I think that they can do it. But they're really, from what I know, there definitely isn't a specific guy who's going to be closing games. It's just going to be whoever Cash sees fit.
Yeah, because they were the reason they eliminated the Yankees last season. I mean, they were just red hot, and like 7th inning on, the Yankees just had no shot.
Yeah.
I'm sure they want to. That's probably going to be similar to the case. And just going around again, the position players, of course, going back to the divisional series, and of course the championships and the World Series. Randy as arena, just out of nowhere, just breaks out. I mean, Yankees couldn't get him out at all. I mean, he took Cole deep, he took everyone deep. And was before the playoffs started, was any insight that this guy was just going to have a breakout like this?
I don't think that there was as big as what he did. Now, remember that in the 2020 season, Randy got COVID at the start of the year. So we ended up, I think, only playing 34 games in the regular season because he was sidelined for the start of the season. Him and Meadows both experienced COVID related problems. So Randy really, like, he got hot towards the end of the year because that was really the only time during the actual season that he got to play. And then I think that everything that happened in the postseason was kind of like his second half of the regular season, and he turned it on. And I didn't think that he was going to do that by any stretch of the imagination. I thought that he was going to help out, hitting 10 home runs, a new postseason record, and the amount of total bases that he had, which was another record, and RBIs and all of that stuff, and hits. I didn't expect that to that extent. I thought he was going to be good, but definitely he broke out in a much bigger way than I think a lot of people thought. And hopefully with a healthy season this year, starting out healthy, I think he should be fine.
Yeah, and then also another, thorn in the Yankees side during the playoffs was G-Man Choi. I guess he settled on arbitration, so he'll be back for one more season. The Yankees actually had him briefly, but I guess they let him go wayside. But he's really found a home in Tampa and now, become like like a kind of a fan favorite hero there.
Yeah, we love G-Man. I didn't think that a man could be that flexible looking like how G-Man Choi looks until I watched him. And apparently in the offseason, he does like specific training where he works on like a first baseman stretch as if he was doing a complete split, which he did during the postseason. But yeah, we love him to death. And he's not by any means the best player on the team. He's just kind of that guy who is just a lovable figure, on any team. And yeah, he's had Garrett Cole's number more. I don't know why it works. I'm not going to complain about it, but it's quite incredible to see. I'm sure for you hate his guts, so I'm not going to try to show off about G-Man Choi that much because I think he's like a 230 hitter career. So,
and another Rays player that kind of goes on under the radar is Kevin Kiermaier. Probably defensively one of the best outfielders out there, but again, really doesn't get much notoriety.
Yeah, defense is incredible. Offense is kind of suspect, but really, when you look at Kevin Kiermaier, you don't look at him for his offense specifically. He's the outfielder version of Andrelton Simmons, where when you look at Simmons, you look specifically at his defense because he's one of the best defensive players in the history of baseball. And the same way, I don't think that Kiermaier is one of the best defensive outfielders in the history of baseball, but I mean, he's definitely in the last, since 2000 in the millennium or in this millennium, he's been one of the best. And yeah, his defense is incredible. His offense is very streaky and is very inconsistent. And a lot of people get frustrated about him about that. And he's also been a guy who's been on the trading block for quite a while now in terms of just a name that people think is going to go next, because Kiermaier's salary, I think, is either at double figures now or above that in terms of like 10 plus mil. And I think he'll probably leave soon. They'll probably find a way to trade him soon. And if not, he'll just stick around until his contract's over and then they'll just let him go to free agency. But yeah, for me personally, he frustrates me, but he also, I love him to death because he'll have an amazing game-saving catch, or he'll hit, like a key double in the eighth inning of a game and end up winning the game. But then the next day he'll go 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts and he'll screw up a crucial situation. So it's a give and take.
And were there any other offseason moves or anything that, worth mentioning, a trade or an addition to whether it was on the bench or in the bullpen?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a few right now. I know they brought back Zunino for $3 million, which, I mean, I'm still angry that they didn't bring back Travis d'Arnaud after 2019, because in terms of catchers, he was probably the best offensive catcher that the Rays have ever had, even though he played, less than 100 games with them over the course of the season. So I was really angry that they didn't bring him back, considering that Atlanta didn't get him for anything. Basically, they didn't really pay that much for him, and he's a stud for them now. So, Zunino, you don't look at him for his bat, even though he can hit the ball really, really far away. You look at him for his defense, and he plays defense really, really well. He's got a great arm. He knows how to catch this Rays pitching staff, which is extremely crucial and important. There is one guy that I think people should be talking about more with this team, and he's my favorite player. It's Brandon Lau. I think that he is absolutely incredible. I know he's not the best second baseman in baseball because LeMahieu's the best second baseman in baseball. And that's not even a question, even though I will dispute that for myself because I just like getting into arguments with people about that because I love Brandon so much. But he is absolutely incredible. He has pop just beyond anything. When he got drafted, so it's actually funny because he's also a Maryland guy. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I really latched onto him to start. But when he got drafted out of college, he broke a bone. I think he broke either his arm or he broke his leg in the 2015 Super Regionals and ended up falling to the third round and basically went under the radar his entire minor league career, slowly worked his way up over the next couple of years, ends up making his debut in 2018 and has just slowly turned into a guy who is not only a good fielder, but is definitely one of the best offensive second basemen, if not the best offensive second baseman in baseball. And he's a guy who I think can hit 35 to 40 home runs a year when he's completely healthy. He is a little bit streaky, but he's definitely someone that fans should, anyone should look out for because I think Major League Baseball had him at it was like 53rd best player in baseball. And he was the leading AL MVP candidate for the first month of 2020. So, or the 2020 season. So going into this season, I think he's going to have a really, really good year. I'm hoping he hits 30 and hopefully he'll hit somewhere around 270 and drive in 80 to 90 runs, but he's a stud.
Yeah. Thanks for, bringing that. Yeah, cause I remember, even, during the playoffs, there's something about the team, like, so many guys just under the radar, but cohesively as a team, the Rays, just a good, solid team. Again, no big, Giancarlo Stanton or superstar like that, but just a good cohesive team. And those are usually teams that win. They just do everything right. They hit singles, they go to first and third, they pitch well, they defend well. And again, those are usually the teams that are standing at the end, whereas probably the Yankees, a little too reliant on home runs and stuff like that. And then again, comes playoff time against good pitching, it's hard to get those home runs. And sometimes I wish the Yankees would be a little more like the Rays and contact and just have a good, solid team, kind of like what they used to have back in the late 90s, where superstars, just a good, solid team.
I did want to ask, how did you feel about the Ottavino trade? Because I was confused about that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah, I was like, why are you getting rid of the guy? But at the end of it does make sense because again, you ship his $11 million out. And then you sign O'Day, who's like, I think they only paying him like, it's a 1-year deal for like $2 or $4 million. It's like peanuts. Okay. I was kind of mixed feeling on Ottavino because like he would be great in the regular season. I mean, I think 2020, his ERA was ballooned up because again, this was a short season and it's kind of funky and, relievers they're up and down a little bit. So, but for the most part, he was a very good regular season pitcher. It was just, the last two postseasons, he just had nothing. He was gassed out and was unreliable. So I figure, like, why do we have this guy? He's unreliable. Let's go with O'Day. He's got his underarm action. He's kind of got a funky motion as well. So I like the move. Again, I was a little curious at first, but like after they shipped him to Boston, then they signed O'Day. It's like, all right, well, it was a money dump. So they actually got rid of some salary and possibly added a better pitcher. The only thing with O'Day is like 38. So just quickly going back to the Rays now, the reason the organization is fascinating is that they compete every year with the Yankees, yet the payroll's like, big difference. But they also like really revolutionized the game. You had Joe Madden with the defensive shifts. I mean, no one's doing that before the Rays are doing it. And now with the whole bullpen day game, again, it was the Rays that started it, and now the rest of baseball is following.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's so weird to think about how the Rays have kind of done things and then how baseball has kind of shaped what it is after, shaped the game after what the Rays have done. I know shifting was a huge thing. And obviously, people have their opinions one way or another about shifts. It's just part of the game now. You can't really avoid it that much. And then with the bullpenning thing, the Rays do it in such an extreme way compared to every other team because they're not afraid to take a guy out in the fourth inning and just rely on the bullpen for the rest of the game. Just because they've utilized bullpen arms so much over the last few years. I know that other teams have been a little bit more reliable on bullpens, but I know that a lot of other teams are still more relying more on their starting pitchers, their pitching staff, things like that. But it's just insane to think about, how many arms that the Rays can throw out. I mean, people say that the amount of guys that they have on their roster, it seems like they have double the amount of guys, or like, one and a half times the amount of guys, just because so many players can do so many different things. And especially with bullpenning and all of that stuff, it's like, I think it's a little bit too excessive, because I'd rather have my starting pitcher go for a little bit longer and not have to rely on the bullpen as much, so that you can conserve arms as the season goes on. If you're going to make a postseason run, then are not gassed like what Nick Anderson was at the end of the 2020 season, because he said that he was just tired out and he didn't have anything left, but he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to be a liability. So that ends up hurting the Rays, because he doesn't say anything and he's gassed. And then he ends up giving up hits and runs in big situations, and games are lost when they shouldn't be lost. And then bullpen arms are having to be used more and more. So, but it's still insane to think about how much they've set the blueprint for what I think future generations of baseball are going to be like.
I totally agree with that. And again, like starting pitchers, probably even going like 6 in the future is probably not going to be. They'll probably yank them out after 4 or 5. So really quickly, of course, again, Tampa just gets to the World Series, and of course with the football, you got Tom Brady down there, and he wins the Super Bowl. So I mean, you think that energy just translates for 2021 for the Rays? I mean, has been more enthusiasm for Rays fans?
I hope so. I mean, Tampa Bay is a real thing. Like, obviously, the Lightning won the Stanley Cup. Bucks just won the Super Bowl, first team to win the Super Bowl at home, which was just insane to think about. Obviously, Rays go to the World Series. And for those that don't know, they also have a soccer team there, the Tampa Bay Rowdies, who play in the USL Championship. They won their conference, then got the championship game, and then that game got canceled for COVID. So every professional sports team in the Tampa Bay area ended up going to their respective championship level games or series or whatever that is. So it's kind of insane to think about how all of that culminated into one season or into the last couple months. So I'm hoping that it continues and the enthusiasm for Tampa Bay sports continues with the Rays. It is really tough just because of, other things that are in the area. Obviously, one of the big things is the Yankees having their spring training complex basically right next to Raymond James Stadium. And that makes it a huge problem. Along with that, all of the transplanted Northerners that are coming down that are already fans of other teams, they don't really want to give up those other teams and then go support the Rays. And there's other things. I mean, people complain about the stadium. I love the stadium as is. I don't care if it looks ugly from the outside. On the inside, they've done a great job. But it's the commute from a lot of people. And I think I've heard that in terms of like population compared to where the stadium is, with the main population of the city itself, it's significantly smaller in terms of the amount of people that are actually within reach of the stadium compared to where the actual major population source of the city is. So that's a huge thing if you want to draw on fans for the future. But I think that even with all of that being said, considering what they did this year, considering the guys that they've brought in, the guys that they have moving forward, I think that there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm for the team moving forward.
All right, no, exciting here. And Alex, again, thanks for joining us. Again, people can check you out and Raise the Roof network. So, read up on the Rays, see what's coming around the corner for your rival. Obviously, I can't root for you in terms of baseball, but I will root for the Tampa soccer team.
Root for the Rowdies.
I root for the Rowdies.